Thank you for listening to the Shanghai Community Fellowship Podcast. To find out more about the SCF community, listen to sermons, and upcoming events, visit us at shanghaifellowship.org.
All right, now last week, I started a series on generosity. And that series started last week. We'll talk about generosity today, and then next Sunday we'll wrap the series up on generosity. And I said something last week that I want to repeat today because, it's so out of characteristic for me to say stuff like this. But I really do believe that of all the spiritual disciplines that we can do in order to live out our faith, I think the discipline of what we do with our money and how we manage it, our money, and I would put in that same bucket, I would also put vocations, because that's where, among other things, we primarily earn our incomes and our money by our vocations or by our work. So I'd put vocation in there, our money, our resources, the things that money ends up buying, we purchase with money, or if we are one of those who might have investments and all that, that whole scene, the way we manage that and what we do with that is, as followers of Jesus, and here's the un-Pastor Dale-like statement, I think of all the spiritual disciplines we can do, probably has the most significant impact on our following Jesus, maybe even more than prayer. And what makes me say that is that simply that if you look at everything that Jesus ever said, and others have, many of you have read the words of Jesus, and others have. Some people have read it so closely they actually count up the words that he uses and the topics that he talks on. And Jesus is talking about money more than any other subject. And about 30% of and sometimes some people think it might even be more than that, if you kind of depending on the nuance of it, that maybe at least 30% of Jesus' teaching is about money and investment and handling just stuff that money buys. I mean, it really is a very, very significant thing. And as a follower of Jesus, to want to care and to want to know what Jesus has to say and be open to his guidance, and leadership in terms of my money, my vocation, my work life, what I do with my work, how I spend my time in my work world and work future, contracts and moving and movement and all that goes with that's become such a dynamic expression of my discipleship and my following of Jesus. Now, if there's one statement that Jesus has made, and like I said, he's made many that might capture in a summary or umbrella kind of a way, it might be this, because Jesus said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. So he kind of just sets it up at the very beginning. Generally speaking, across the board, from A to Z, however you want to say that, just being that generous, giving person versus the person who put me at the front of the line because I want to be more the receiver than the giver in this situation, is going to be the best life that we can live as a follower of Jesus, to be a generous, giving person. And as we looked at Matthew chapter 6 last week, and you looked at the heart of what Jesus was saying here, we realized that starting point for Jesus is the promise that he's making to you and to me as we follow him. And that promise is this: you will always have enough. You will always have enough. Imagine how your life would have been different. And several people last week said, boy, Pastor Dale, you were quite transparent last week. So here's more transparency. I can also imagine how my adult life the last 40 years would have been different if I had known, not just known, but actually had been convinced that Jesus would honor that promise to me that I would always have enough. Wow, I just know that I know. I can't tell you all the details, but I know it would have made a difference. If I could have just believed into that promise, it's okay, because he's promised that I will always have enough. I'm going to be okay because he's promised that I will always have enough. As I said, Jesus spoke a lot about money. And as you look at the things that he says, a lot of what he is saying is actually a warning. I mean, we're going to look at a few of those times today, but a lot of what Jesus has to say about money, in other words, he's not giving investment advice, okay? You know, Mark chapter 17, verse 6, you know, buy mutual funds and invest early and sell late. You know, I don't know, it doesn't say that. No, it's really a lot of warning. Because as you read these words, and I hope that you will be, open to the fact that Jesus knows a lot more about you than you know about you. And he knows a lot more about me. He knows a lot more about humans. He knows the heart of men and women, as it said. And he knows us. So when he warns us, we should if we take following Jesus seriously, we should be paying attention to that. Wow, Jesus is warning me. He's guiding, he's leading, he's downloading wisdom here. And I'm not just going to listen to it. I'm going to take it and follow it as best I can. It may be captured in what he said here in Luke chapter 12. And then he said to them, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. And this is the statement that we'll stop here. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. You know, probably many of us here would say, oh, yeah, definitely. I believe that. And I agree with that. But does my way that I live actually kind of come up in line with my life does not exist in an abundance of possession? Jesus is, I think, clearly picking up on something that he would have read in his Bible, in other words, the Old Testament, which is still our Bible, an idea, a bit of wisdom from Ecclesiastes 5, verse 10. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. That's in the Bible. Whoever loves money and never loves wealth is never satisfied. So Jesus keeps warning us about our potential greed, about our desire to have more, and he keeps warning about this. And as I said, for a reason. It's like, you keep hearing these warnings like this from somebody who knows what they're talking about, and they're looking right at you and saying, you say, maybe I should be listening. This is really good stuff, and I need to take it to heart. Now, few of us, I'm going to guess, few of us would say, all right, Pastor Dale, you got me. Yep, I'm greedy. Yeah, that's me. Yep, I'm greedy. I know it, I'm greedy. Oh, yeah, yep, that's me. I know it right down to the core, just nothing but greed, And probably few of us would really kind of step up to just own that, right? What would most of us do? We would mostly say, well, I might be a little bit greedy, but I'm certainly not as greedy as her. And if you like the Dickens classic, A Christmas Carol, we might say, well, I'm not as greedy as Scrooge. I mean, sure, I might have been able to help out there or a time or two. I probably could be a little more generous, but, sure, I could grow in this kind of a thing, but really, come on. I'm not as bad. I'm not as bad as the character Scrooge. I think I'm okay. It's a good message, Pastor Dale. I'm glad we're talking about greed, and I'm sure there's somebody here who needs to hear this. But I'm not Scrooge, and I'm not sure that we're really talking about me. Yeah. At another place, Jesus said, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a wealthy person to enter the kingdom of God. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a wealthy person or the wealthy to enter the kingdom of God. That's Matthew chapter 19, verse 24. It's not that. By the way, let's be really clear about this, because sometimes we get this message gets a little confused right here. Is there a picture that goes with that, guys? Is there a picture that goes with that? No. All right. Sometimes we get a little. There it is. Thank you. I just wanted you to see my camel and my needle. I didn't draw that. I just found that. But I thought it communicates well. All right. I want to be really clear because this is a point where sometimes it gets confusing. The message gets turned around. Because sometimes people think, the teaching of Christianity is that you can't be wealthy and be a follower of Jesus. No wealthy people in the kingdom allowed, Or if you have money, you have to give it all away so that you're not wealthy anymore. You can be poor like everybody else. I don't believe that is the message or the teaching of Christianity. I think what Jesus is actually saying to us, it's not that we can't be wealthy as we follow Jesus. I think his message to us is that it's hard to be wealthy and follow Jesus. And it would be unwise to not think so if you are following Jesus and you are a wealthy person. Oh, this is easy, piece of cake, easy peasy, as they say. Yeah, I can, money. And Jesus is warning us that as we grow in influence and wealth, that it becomes harder to follow him. And maybe some of us know stories of people that we could say, I have a family member, I have a friend, that wealth really messed them up. They were following Jesus very closely and had this really intimate, wonderful relationship with Christ, and yet the increase of their wealth really, really caused them a lot of problems. It's not the wealth, it's the managing the wealth and the stewarding of the wealth, and the fact that it is a hard and challenging thing to do. As one person said, if you like the Lord of the Rings, the trilogy of the Lord of the Rings, it's like Frodo's ring. Money, he said, is like Frodo's ring. Only the pure in heart can really carry it without being consumed by it. And this is money. This is money. Generosity, then, is the practice that keeps us content and not overcome by either our fear that we're never going to have enough or the greed that keeps driving us to have more and more and more and more. We often find ourselves somewhere in that space. I'm either afraid I'm never going to have enough, I'm always thinking about how I can get more, I'm always worried we're going to run out, or I'm just driven. There's more, just a little bit more, that's what I've got. Just $1, one renminbi more, one RMB note more, and I'll be satisfied. Generosity is the practice that keeps us content. Becky and I knew someone many years ago. His name was Roy. And Roy was married, had a few kids, and a mother-in-law. I think she lived with him maybe. And Roy was a person that, when we knew him, I think he was unemployed. But before he was unemployed, when we did not know him, he mostly worked in unskilled labor, if you can say it that way. He didn't have a university degree, didn't have a graduate degree, just a person from job to job where he could be hired, where he could get a job. And I'll never forget the day, or the time anyway, that on a Sunday at a church, when we gathered together as a community, Roy told us how he had just been hired by the Ford Motor Company to work on their production line. And where we were living at the time, in that particular season of time, to get a job in one of the major U.S. automobile manufacturers was highly competitive. They just didn't hire that often, and people applied and let their applications sit there month after month after month, a long time, while you just waited and waited. There might even have been a lottery system, for all I can remember. And Roy got a job at the Ford Motor Company. And then he told us how much he was going to make, what his income was going to be, not only per hour, but for the year. Pastor Dale, I got a job at the Ford Motor Company, and I'm going to make this much per hour. And if I work every day of the year, maybe a little overtime, this is how much I can make for my entire year. And he was so excited to tell us that how much he was making. And then I'd see him next Sunday, and he would say, "Hey, Pastor Dale, did I tell you that I got a job at the Ford Motor Company?" I said, yeah, you told me last week. Yeah. He said, well, and did I tell you how much I was going to make per hour? I said, yeah, you told me all that last week. And the beautiful thing about Roy, as I remember him, is that I knew Roy, as I said, when he was unemployed, and I knew him to be a very generous person. I mean, he literally had very little. But he was a very generous man. I also knew that depending on him financially were a couple of kids, like I said, a mother-in-law. I think there was a sister-in-law involved there, a whole troop of people kind of leaning on Roy. And what was so encouraging to me about him was as he celebrated with all of us, because he told every single person he met, he just got hired by the Ford Motor Company and how much he was going to make per hour, I knew that everyone who knew Roy and all of his family were also going to be raised up as God raised Roy up, because his generosity was going to touch his entire family, and it did. And when I think back and I remember Roy, to me, he just stands out as like the picture of a generous person whose life was touched. God blessed him. He got a job at Ford Motor Company, and then he just spread that generosity all around. And this is the kind of living that God is calling us to. But to live this kind of life, we need to heed the warnings that Jesus is giving. He knows, and he knows us. The first warning would be this, that money, Matthew chapter 6, money has a unique God-like quality that can be a trap for us. And it's a trap of idolatry. And idolatry is actually worshiping something or putting something in the place of God that where God should be. Jesus said, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Jesus here is putting money and almost deifying it. Now, I'm not creating a new doctrine. I'm not saying that God is money. But he's lending this level of intensity and warning, because he knows that you and I, people, unchecked, can just start worshiping their money. They worship the things that money can buy. They worship the things that money can do. Money can be like a rival god. It's sometimes reflected in the phrase that we use where I'm from. We will often refer to the almighty dollar. Sounds like almighty God, doesn't it? The almighty dollar. Once money or wealth becomes something we worship, it just takes over. It's subtle. We don't see it coming. We're clueless about it at times. That's why Jesus is warning us. Don't worship our money. Money's a part of our lives, but we don't have to worship our money. But we do have to resist its very, very strong attraction. All right? That's the first warning. And then Jesus gives us another warning when he warns us of taking ownership of something that doesn't belong to us. He warns us about taking ownership of something that doesn't belong to us. And so he told this parable. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to the crowd that gathered around, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." There's the context. And then he told them a parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns. I will build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God." So in this short little parable, we read about a wealthy man who has a problem. And then we read about his solution. I'm going to build more barns. Lastly, we read about him reflecting on his future, and especially a future in light of the solution that he has created. I'm doing well. That's a little bit of a challenge, a little bit of a problem. I've got it. I'm going to build more barns. And then third stanza, he's reflecting on, isn't life good? Isn't my future good? I got this settled. And then fourth stanza, God speaks. God speaks. Everything that we have, everything that I have does not actually belong to me. And it doesn't belong to you either. And the mistake is to think that it does. And that's what's happening in this parable. God's going to point out to this man that all the barns and everything inside the barns and all the wealth, and that's all good. It's good for you. I'm glad you've got it, but it's not yours. And maybe even more importantly, not only does all the stuff or the wealth or my vocation, it doesn't belong to God, but even my very soul does not belong to me. It belongs to God. And this parable reminds him, and in a very poignant way, and reminds us that all these things belong to the Father, and in a very real sense are like on loan to us. I've got this time in my life, I've got this city where I live, I have this vocation where I can earn an income, and I have skills and abilities that God has given to me. I have the kind of things that my abilities and skills that were given to me allow me to have, and even my life are all on loan from Him to me. Money is not neutral, but it is powerful. And it's not easy to manage it well. It's not easy to manage it well. So we need some help. And that's what this series is about. And there's much, much more that you can find out about. And warning number 3, don't be naive and don't be deceived. Don't be naive and don't be deceived. Jesus said, still others, like seed sown among thorns, hear the word, but the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desires for other things come in and choke the word, making it unfruitful. Others, like seed sown on good soil, hear the word, accept it, and produce a crop, some 30, 60, some 100 times what was sown. So these couple verses fall right in a larger story where Jesus is comparing the gospel to like a seed. And he's describing how the seed of the gospel, the good news about Jesus, falls on different kinds of soil, right? And those soils represent different kinds of people. And he describes, in this particular case, the soil that is like this. It's a soil that is characterized by the deceitfulness of wealth, and then that wealth begins to choke out the life that is in the Word. He talks about the deceitfulness of wealth. And how does it deceive us? And how does it choke us? By promising what wealth cannot give. And we believe that promise. We look to wealth and we think, if I'm wealthy, if I have money, or if I have more, then I will have this, and then I will have that, and my life will be better, and I'll have all these problems solved, and this and that. And money can't do that. And the deception is we look to our wealth and think, there's my answer. That's where it's coming from. I just need more money. So often we are searching for in money what only God can provide. And that's a bit of a wake-up call to ask yourself, what am I looking for? And am I looking in the wrong place? What am I looking for? And because what we're looking for is in the Father, is in God, but we're not looking there. We're not looking there. Actor Jim Carrey said, I think everybody should get rich and famous and everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that that's not the answer. The Apostle Paul would write, the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. What a strong statement, right? The love of money has caused all kinds of evil and problems, and some people have actually just wandered from the faith and lost their eternal soul as they just wandered after the pursuit of money and wealth. Remember, to be clear here, it's not money, it's the love of money. It's the love of money, not the money itself. The love is our problem, but love of money is a root problem. That's why, one of the reasons why it's so powerful, because it's very, very much rooted. The love of money becomes a very deeply rooted problem that leads to all kinds of evil. And again, you and I can probably think of people that we know, no judgments here, but their story is a story of the pursuit of money and the love of money that got them wandering all over the place, but worst of all, wandering away from the love of God and His life for them. So you get the theme, right? You're getting a theme here, right? The warning that Jesus is giving out. 1, 2, 3. And there's a lot more that we could say. Let's just pick 3. There's a lot more that Jesus has said to us about the warnings of deception and seduction and the enticement. And he's warning us, don't be so naive about money and vocation and the things that money can buy. Be on guard. Be on your guard. Be on your guard. You know, against all of this is the promise of contentment. Contentment. The writer to the Hebrews said, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. You know, sometimes when we hear something like contentment, our first response can be, yeah, one day I'm going to do that. One day, when this and when that and then this and if that and over here and in another time and another place, if these things, and then I'll be content. But the contentment that God is talking about here is a contentment that is practiced right here and right now. No matter what your circumstances are, no matter what your income is, no matter what your investment portfolio looks like, no matter what the hiring practices are of the kinds of companies where you're looking for a job happen to be at this very moment. Contentment like this is not a one day yes, but a here and now kind of a contentment. And this is also God's promise to us. In 1 Timothy verses 6 and 7, which we read just a moment ago about not to love money, he says that we can be content in those verses as well. And here's what he says. Here's why we can be content. Number one is all the stuff that we have, we're not taking it with us. Over the years, I've done a lot of funerals in a different time. I lived in the U.S. particularly. And, it really is true. You just don't take it with you. On the last day of your life, you breathe your last, and you don't. Maybe some friends will pack up all your record collection, or your vinyl collection. Pack up your vinyl collection and they'll put it in the coffin with you. I don't know what are they going to do with all that stuff. Your Harley Davidson, your degree from Beijing Dashua or Fudan University. We'll put it all in your coffin, and what will it really matter? You don't take it with you. Contentment is not about those things. He also says, again, how can I be content here and now? Because he promised I would always have enough. I come back to that. Because he promised I will always have enough. Let's come back to Hebrews 13 again. Now the full verse. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you or forsake you. So we say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? Pastor John Mark Comer said, not wealth or poverty, but freedom and contentment. It's not a wealth or poverty question. It's a freedom and contentment question. And this is the promise of God to us. Author Randy Alcorn, speaking of contentment, wrote, contentment is being satisfied in whose you are, who you are, and in what you have. Those who love and serve Jesus can only be truly content, and those who love and serve money can never be. Now here's the thing, and I'm almost done. But next week, we're going to talk about a perspective that allows us to actually live with all of the wealth that we have or don't have from the perspective of ownership. Stewardship and not ownership. If I don't own it, what am I doing with it? If it's not mine to keep, what am I doing with it? And then the other thing we're going to do next week is we're going to get to best practices. You've been wondering when I was probably going to get to that. Next week, best practices. So what do we do? How do we, you got it, Pastor Dale, I woke up, you got it, I'm hearing this, and I got the warning. So what do I do? What do I do? And next week, best practices. I want to close with a story that is written by author Ken Bailey. A certain man had 2 sons. One of the sons was rich and the other was poor. The rich son had no children, while the poor son was blessed with many sons and daughters. In time, the father fell ill, and he was sure he would not live through the week. So on Saturday, he called his sons to his side, and he gave each of them half of his land, because all of his wealth was tied up in property. So he gave each of them half of the land as their inheritance, and then he died. Before sundown, the sons buried their father with respect, as custom would require. And that night, the rich son could not sleep. He tossed and he turned, and he said to himself, I just don't think what my father has done is just or fair. He said, I'm rich, but my brother is poor. I have enough bread to feed myself and my wife for an indefinite number of days, more than enough to spare, but my brother has many children with not enough to eat. His whole family and their kids are really, literally, don't know if they're going to be able to eat the next day, just one day at a time. And they have to trust God for each day. He said to himself as he tossed and turned that night, I must move the landmark which our father set in the middle of the land, so that my brother will have a greater share. And then he thought, but he must not see me, because if he sees me moving that landmark, it will shame him. He thought, you know what I'll do? I'll rise early in the morning before it's dawn, and I'll move the landmark. And with this, he fell asleep and was peaceful. Meanwhile, his poor brother could not sleep as well. He also lay in his bed restless with the very same thought. What my father decided to split our land 50-50 like this was not fair. It wasn't just. Here I am surrounded by the wealth and the joy of many sons and daughters, while my brother must daily face the shame of having no sons to carry on his name or no daughters to comfort him in his old age. He should have the land of our fathers. He should be the one with the land of our fathers. Perhaps this will in part compensate him in his old age. Perhaps this will help him face his indescribable poverty. But if I get up in the day, if I go to him in the day and I change that landmark, he will be ashamed. I know what I'll do. I will get up early this morning, and I will go and I will move the landmark in the middle of our father's property. And with this, he went to sleep, secure and peaceful in the plan. On the very first day of the week, very early in the morning, a long time before it was day, the two brothers met in the middle of their father's field, and they wept as they fell into each other's arms. I thought long and hard about this story and how I wanted to apply it today. And so I want to bring us today to this place. You know, generosity can be a very, very healing thing. Generosity can be a very healing act. And I'm wondering if there might be someone here today, or maybe possibly more than one someone, that for you, your act of generosity will bring healing. Your single act of generosity, and you may even right now already know what it is, will bring healing to a broken relationship. Someone you love and care about very much. You know, on that day, back to that parable in Luke chapter 12, when the man shouted from the crowd, Jesus, Jesus, settle this inheritance problem between me and my brother. Jesus never actually does that. If you look at it again, he actually never says, oh, yeah, you got to get this, and you got to, he doesn't do that. What he does is he sets both of those brothers on a path of healing through the act of generosity. So is it possible that today you know your generous act will bring healing to someone you love very much? Is there a way for you to express the love of God through you? It's not about poverty. It's not about wealth. It's about freedom and contentment. May we all be generous. May we all be Roy. I just got hired by Ford Motor Company. And you know how much I'm going to make every hour? Wow. But he never said it. He just did it. He lifted his entire family with generosity. Father, I pray today and give thanks. I love you, Lord. I thank you for the generous heart that you have toward each and every one of us. If all you ever did for us was give us your Son, it would be enough. It would be enough. But there's so much more. I pray that today in our own ways, you are speaking to us by your Spirit, one by one. It's an individual response. It's a unique calling that each one of us must answer. How will I be like my generous Father in the life that he has given me to live? I pray by your Spirit, move in us. May we be the kind of person that hears the word and does the word to the glory of our great God. In his name we pray. Amen.